Ali, thank you for joining me, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Well, of course, thank you very much, Todd. It's great to be with you. A lot is happening, so let's see what we can talk about.
Yes, well, you had a conference yesterday. Let's start with there first, and then I have some question for you. What did you
Sure.
reveal yesterday?
Well, yesterday, our office in DC basically revealed the previously unknown command and structure of the Iranian regime's the terrorist operations abroad. As you may know, on July 31st, the United States plus 13 other Western nations issued a joint statement expressing deep concern about the rise of Iranian regime's terrorism on their territories, in some cases using organized crime gangs like Moroccan Mafia and others.
Hmm.
And our revelation dealt with that. We laid bare the command structure, who are the key leaders, and who are the people that devise, plan, and carry out these terrorist operations abroad. Interestingly, two of those identified actually are, one of them is the current Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, and the other, Ghulam Hossein Mohammad was the actually station chief of the Ministry of Intelligence in Europe. Then when the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK, were relocated to Albania, he was sent there as the ambassador. And of course, that's where in March of 2018, they devised the car bombing of the New Year celebration at Ashraf 3, where several senior U.S. Former officials like New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton, and also the American Deputy Chief of Mission, plus several Europeans were present. Fortunately, Albanian security services foiled that plot. Ultimately, that led to the expulsion of Mohammad Nia from Albania and the closure of the regime's embassy. But interestingly, Mohammad Nia was also a key figure during the nuclear talks between the Obama administration and the Iranian regime. And there are many pictures of him in meetings with John Kerry and with Catherine Ashton, the EU former high representative, talking about nuclear program of Iran. So while, of course, he was there as a diplomat, in reality, the Americans and the Europeans were talking to a hardcore terrorist.
Hmm.
And another gentleman, Reza Amiri Mogaddam, who is now, as I said, the ambassador to Pakistan, was also part of the nuclear negotiating team, and also was heavily involved in discussions when the Americans in Iraq, Ryan Crocker, the American ambassador in Iraq, was negotiating with the Iranians, and this guy was sitting there in the meeting. So again, you have the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and the IRGC Sports Force, the extraterritorial arm, engaged in these so-called negotiations. And now what they have done is to form a special headquarters called Qasem Soleimani, who, as you know, was the eliminated commander of the IRGC Sports Force. He was killed in January of 2020 in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And that particular headquarters is directly involved in terrorist operations across the world. And we also showed that we ourselves have been targets of several terrorist plots, including the famous June 2018, at which you were present, by the way. You had come there to report on it, and it was almost blown up. Mm-hmm. And an Iranian diplomat, the accredited diplomat in Vienna, who was in actuality the station chief for MIS in the whole of Europe, was the mastermind of that. And we also revealed in this conference who his boss was and who was giving him the marching orders. As you know, he brought a very powerful explosive TATP from Iran aboard a commercial airliner, Austrian Airlines, and passed it through the customs in a diplomatic patch, and then delivered it to the terrorist in Luxembourg. He traveled 1,000 miles from Vienna to deliver it there, but fortunately he was caught in Germany because he had been under surveillance. We also showed that the Iranian regime was involved in terrorism against our office in the NCRI office in Berlin, the Office of Supporters in London, 2 attacks on an office where NCRI supporters work in Paris. And of course, as you may know, in 2018, in August, the FBI unsealed a federal complaint of 2 Iranian sleeper cells, one of them actually a US citizen because he was born here, who were actually MIS agents in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And one part of their operation was a capture-kill operation against NCR officials in Washington, D.C. So this was a very important press conference. And if anything, I think Europeans and whomever else wants to negotiate with the regime should think twice as to who they are meeting with, because these are not diplomats, these are terrorists. And of course, I think it's quite good that the US administration and these 13 European countries have expressed concern. Let's hope that this statement goes beyond words and translates into action, and they close down the Iranian regime embassies, because these are not diplomatic centers. They are hubs of intelligence gathering, hatching terrorist plots, and kidnapping and killing. That several Iranian dissidents have been kidnapped and ultimately executed in Iran in the past few years.
So you were targeted in that group of officials in the U.S., right? The FBI.
Yes, actually myself and my colleague whom you know well, Ali Reza, who actually conducted the press conference yesterday, our name was specifically mentioned. They had taken lots of pictures of us.
Mm-hmm.
They had our commute under surveillance in Los Angeles, where we had traveled to, also in Washington, and also in New York. They had come actually to a rally that was held outside the UN headquarters in New York City. I think you also came there, and also in Washington, where we had a convention where there were very high-profile American dignitaries were attending in, if I'm not mistaken, May of 2018.
Yeah.
And yes, they had come there, and they had taken our pictures, and other also NCRI officials who are in Washington, D.C. So it was a very serious attempt on their part. Again, thanks to vigilance of U.S. law enforcement, they were apprehended, and they were tried and convicted and sentenced to jail.
So what is happening with the regime itself? We always talk about bringing it down from the inside and not necessarily with outside, force, but that your organization has the ability to take it down from the inside. What's happening on the ground?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because actually, as I was coming to our interview, we got a very, very serious report just coming out of, let me see if I can find it here, of 5 people sentenced to death, is right here, sentenced to death on the charge of membership in the MEK. And their appeals had been rejected by the Supreme Court. They were, as you may remember, when Evin prison was attacked during the Israeli assault during the 12-day war, the Iranian regime moved all the prisoners in Evin to another prison in Tehran called Fashafuye, which is a dreadful location, really lacking minimum means of subsistence and living standards for prisoners. Now, because of tremendous protests by families, they decided to return everybody back to Evin, save for these 5 prisoners. And they took them to another prison near Tehran, which is called Gettr Hesab prison. That's where execution sentences are carried out. And so this puts them at imminent risk of execution, remembering that on July 27, 2 other political prisoners, one 70 years old, Behruz Ehsani, and another Mehdi Hassani, 48 years old, the father of 3, were hanged despite an international outcry to save their lives on trumped-up charges, undergoing unfair trial. forced confessions, torture for 3 years, actually. And so, in fact, there has been a tremendous rise in the number of executions in Iran since this so-called moderate Pezeshkian took office. Actually, just to give you some specific data, just yesterday or the day before, 16 political prisoners were hanged on August the 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And 93 have been hanged in the past 2 weeks, which represents a 127% increase compared to the same period in 2024 and a 210% increase compared to 2023.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
And before that, 29 prisoners, including one woman, were hanged between August 3rd and August 6th. And in fact, during Pezeshkian's 1-year tenure, adding these 16, some 1,560 people have been hanged, including dozens of dissidents, many women, many juveniles. And what does this tell you? It tells you that the Iranian regime's status within Iran is very, very precarious and tenuous.
Mm-hmm.
And because protests are ongoing, Iran, as you know, is suffering now from chronic water shortage, power cuts, high prices, unemployment, and the regime cannot offer any solution. Everything has been a disaster since Pezeshkian took office. Iranian currency has lost more than 50% of its value. Every day there are protests in various cities across Iran, protesting shortage of water and also power cuts, consistent power cuts that destroys all the businesses, like bakeries, fish stores, because the dough and the fish rots when you have no electricity, as well as other vegetables and meat and beef and whatever. So the regime, the only way out available to it is to ramp up execution of Iranian citizens to intimidate the public. As you may know, previously it had Syria, it had Lebanon, it had the Houthis in Yemen, it had the Shiite militias in Iraq. But of course, with the devastating defeats it has suffered across the region, including the fall of Assad and decapitation of the Hezbollah and the pressures on the Houthis and whatnot, the only means of its survival is to turn against the Iranian people. And I mean, the number of executions are just staggering.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as you might imagine, the international community is deaf and mute. And the only thing they do is issue statements, but that, we don't care about the statements on those who are dead. Mm-hmm. We want them to do something about those who are living and face imminent executions.
Yeah.
And that is why I think our activities, both on the terrorism front and on the human rights front and on the nuclear front, are designed to demonstrate to the international community that enough is enough. Enough talking, let's do something, and deny this regime the lifeline with which it suppresses the Iranian people and wreaks havoc in the Middle East. And as of course there's serious concern about Iran's secret nuclear program to get the bomb. Yes, of course, they suffered heavy losses, heavy damage in the known sites, but that Iranian nuclear program has been shrouded in secrecy, and who knows where. They are basically working feverishly around the clock to get the bomb, which would be for them a life insurance policy.
Interesting. You mentioned the nuclear program. What about the snapback sanctions? Is that a thing? Is that something on the table?
Well, as you may know, EU, actually E3, Germany, France, and Britain held talks with the regime a couple of weeks ago, and the meetings ended without any meaningful result. Both sides agreed to meet again. And of course, if snapback is triggered, I think it would be a very, very important step, because it would basically, what it would do is reactivate 6 Security Council resolutions that, if you remember, were suspended in the aftermath of the so-called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in July of 2015. Now, if those resolutions, which are, if I may just say, Resolution 1696, which was adopted on 31st July 2006, which was the first UN Security Council resolution on Iran nuclear program, and it demanded that the regime suspend all enrichment activity and reprocessing work. Then there was Resolution 1737, adopted on 23 December 2006. It imposed the first round of sanctions on the regime for non-compliance. It prohibited supply of nuclear-related materials and technology. Then there was Resolution 1747, which was adopted on 24 March 2007, expanded the sanctions, barred arms exports to Iran. Then there was Resolution 1803, 3 March 2008, in fact, broadened travel bans and asset freezes of regime's officials involved in the nuclear program. And then there was Resolution 1835 that condemned the regime's refusal to suspend uranium enrichment. And then you had the 6th one, Resolution 1929, adopted on 9 June 2010, which basically imposed the most far-reaching sanctions and prohibited the regime from investing abroad in uranium mining, banned ballistic missile activity, and a whole host of other things. But unfortunately, all of these resolutions were suspended in the, our view, a misplaced and illusory hope that with the JCPOA and the easing of sanctions, the regime would change its approach to its nuclear weapons program, which it did not. In fact, while the JCPOA was ongoing, the regime kept cheating, and they had 4 undeclared sites where the IAEA inspected, and they found uranium particles. And of course, the regime hasn't offered any explanation as to why. They continued their secret work on making warheads, which you need to put on these ballistic missiles to deliver the bomb. And of course, many of these, by the way, were revealed by the NCRI. In fact, over the past 20-some years, we have made 130 revelations about the Iran nuclear weapons program. So as you can see, Todd, and as we have been saying in all these years, that these problems that the international community has with this regime, they must be dealt with in a holistic approach. You cannot just focus on the nuclear deal and forget about their terrorism in the Middle East and their attempts to assassinate dissidents abroad. You cannot forget about their human rights abuses within Iran. And so all of these must be dealt with in a comprehensive manner. And you mentioned at the outset of the program that we say that regime change must be taken or undertaken by the Iranian people and the organized resistance. We are quite capable of doing that, but what is needed is for the international community, the US, Europe, others, to stand with us in this endeavor, to say, yes, after 46 years of tolerating this regime, offering it sanctions, closing our eyes to its abuses against its own people, killing of foreign nationals, the havoc they wreaked in Iraq, elsewhere, that it is time for this regime to go, and let us stand with the Iranian people and help them do what they can do and they're willing to do. I mean, when you talk about these executions, this is the price that the Iranian people are paying every day to defy this regime. So it is time for the international community to really shift this policy. You know, there has been a missing link in the Western policy toward Iran, and that missing link in the Iranian factor that has been ignored completely. And so that is why we say there has to be, I think, a very fundamental revision of Western approach to the Iranian regime. The mullahs are not faithful trade partners, interlocutors. They cheat and lie, and we are where we are today because of this failure of policy. You know, Mrs. Rajavi, 21 years ago, the European Parliament said, look, you want to avoid war, but by appeasement, you will have dishonor and war. And of course, we saw that happened back in June. So that's where we are now.
Last question. The proxy army Hezbollah in Lebanon is allegedly been told to disarm by the government. A lot of pushback by the population in Lebanon. Any comments on that or thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I have seen the official statement, but as to whether Hezbollah has really disarmed remains to be seen. As you may know, of course, Hezbollah was the brainchild of the Iranian regime. It was created from scratch by the mullahs. You know, the former Iranian defense minister Hossein Dehqan boasts about forming the Hezbollah back in 1982-83 in the Bekaa Valley. And so I think the Iranian regime will do everything in its efforts to pressure the Lebanese government to prevent them from demanding total disarmament of the Hezbollah. If it happens, I think it's good for the people of Lebanon. I think the people of Lebanon want it. I mean, you know, their country has been turned into ruin. I remember when I was a young kid, you know, people were talking about Lebanon as the Paris of, about Beirut as the Paris of the Middle East. But look at what it is now. And so whether that in actuality has happened, I think the jury is still out. But if it happens, it's a good sign. It will further clip the wings of the mullahs from interfering in regional countries.
Ali, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on. And
my pleasure, Todd. You're doing great work, and thanks again for everything.
All right, take care.